Make way for Mr. Speaker.
I invite the member for Richmond Queensborough to lead the House in prayer or reflection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, today is Gurpurab, which is Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the founder of Sikhism. It's his the day of his birth, celebrated by millions of people the world over. One of his prayers that is part of our spirituality and we generally do every day is called the Mool Mantar. I'll speak it in Punjabi and in English as well. Ek Onkar, there is one universal uniting higher power. Satnam Karta Purak, its essence is truth from which the universe is created. Nirba Nirvair. Its essence is without fear, without hate, beyond hate. Akal Murat, omnipresent, formless, timeless, infinite. Ajuni Saibang, Gurprasad Jap, never born, self-perpetuating, with the Guru's grace recite. Ad Sach Jugat Sach, its essence from the beginning, truth, throughout the ages, truth. Habi Sach, Nanak Hosi Bhi Sach. In this moment, now, the essence of universality is truth. And says Nanak, it will always be the truth. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Introductions by members. Member for Burnaby Lougheed.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker. First, I just want to quickly thank all the support that I've received from all the colleagues, staff, and the press gallery and friends. Yesterday, it really means a lot to me and my son, who also loves reading social media updates. Today, I actually want to share some really good news. Last week, we all know that our dear colleague and friend, the Minister of Emergency Management and Climate Readiness, welcomed her beautiful baby daughter, Azalea. The same week, Friday, another friend and sister who also has a strong connection to this house and have done years of work in the community, Jasling Aurora, also welcomed her adorable, handsome baby boy, Jeevan Singh Aurora, after 30 hours of labor and hard work. It is also worth noting that Jeevan is the 5th baby of our former childcare team that has been very, very productive with babies. Actually started with the Attorney General's baby boy. So I just want to wish all these moms and their growing families all the best. Congratulations, Jasling, her husband Justin, and baby Jeevan. Thank you.
Minister of Labour.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. In the House today are a number of executive members of Health Sciences Association of BC who are here to meet with the government representatives. I'm sure they will talk to the Minister of Health if they haven't done that already. And Mr. Speaker, Health Sciences Association, the members are led by their president, KNC. They represent about 20,000 members all across the province. They are engaged in healthcare, science, and community services professionals, over 250 hospitals. Imagine the kind of service that they provide anytime we end up going to get the healthcare services at any of the hospitals. These members are there to help us. So please help me, first of all, thank you for all the good work that you do, and help me give them a very warm welcome.
Minister of Municipal Affairs.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. In the gallery today, I have two special guests from the District of Central Saanich, Mayor Ryan Windsor and also CEO Christine Cullum. Central Saanich is located in the midsection of Vancouver Island Saanich Peninsula, and it is home to breathtaking beaches, rolling farmlands, wineries, restaurants, hotels, and of course the world-famous Butchart Gardens. My ministry remains committed to working with our local governments collaboratively and to address the community's top priorities and support their community's vibrant growth. I look forward to meeting with the mayor later today after question period. Would the House please make Mayor Windsor and Christine very welcome.
Member for Saanich North and the Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor today to rise and introduce Jerry Taylor to this Legislative Assembly. Some people here may know Jerry from his time working in the provincial government. I am blessed as the representative for Saanich North and the Islands to have many current and former government leaders live in our community, retire in our community. Jerry was brought to British Columbia because of his love for fishing, something that we have in common. He's been working on environmental issues in British Columbia since the 1950s, starting as a hatchery technician at BC Fish and Wildlife and eventually becoming the deputy director under the Wildlife Act for fish habitat and fisheries. And it is such an honor to be able to have constituents like Jerry who can provide their wisdom to me and share their experiences. I've only been in this business for a very few short years, and so it's wonderful to have people who are willing to share their wisdom with me and help guide and direct the work that I do in this Legislative Assembly. High School CM to Jerry, and could this House please make him feel very welcome.
Minister of State for Workforce Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And we've got a great group of young people up in the gallery today. Ms. Katie Glover's political studies class from Brookswood Secondary, from back home in Langley. They're with teacher Victoria Weeb today because unfortunately Ms. Glover couldn't make it. She's on maternity leave after giving birth to a healthy and beautiful baby girl, Elsie Glover. So will the House please make the class welcome and please congratulate Katie on her new baby girl.
Leader of the Third Party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I have a very special guest that I'd like to introduce today. It's my pleasure to introduce the Honourable Jackson Kizwaga, a member of the Tanzanian Parliament. He is here with a guest as well, Helen Nation, who has done work in Tanzania with her husband Bob to bring water projects to Tanzania. It's been a real pleasure to meet and to get to know Jackson. I very much enjoyed hearing from him about Tanzania and the work as a parliamentarian with the House. Please make him most welcome.
Member for Langley East.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I just want to take a quick moment to introduce someone very special in the House. She's joining the school group, but I've had the privilege of knowing this amazing young lady for over 6 years through the farming community and through 4-H, and I can't even believe she's in high school now. I swear she's still just a couple feet tall. I'm wondering if the House could please help me make Victoria Boss feel very welcome to precinct today. I'm absolutely thrilled to see her smiling face up there.
Member for Nelson Creston.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Today I am delighted to be able to introduce into the House my Mayor, Janice Morrison. Janice is the Mayor for Nelson. We serve together on council, but Janice and I go way back. Her husband, Mike Bondaroff, worked with my dad since I was 6 months old. So I am super grateful for Janice's friendship, mentorship, but also the incredible partnership that I get to have with the City of Nelson. We have a lot of tough issues that we have to tackle, but the best part is that the Mayor and I get to tackle those together. So will the House please welcome Janice Morrison, Mayor of Nelson, here with us today. Thank you very much.
Member for Nanaimo North Cowichan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have two introductions. First, I'd like to introduce to the House Ryan Alger and Kate Middleton Alger. They've recently moved from Alberta to BC, and they've chosen Ladysmith as their home, and I thank them for that. And those of you who know how steep the hills are in Ladysmith, we are always relieved to tell people that you're never over the hill in Ladysmith. So that they've made a good choice. And the second introduction is a group of students from the Classical Conversation group from my riding. Will the House please help me make them welcome?
Minister of State for Childcare.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a number of guests who are here and coming today. They are local housing advocates, folks who've come together to advocate for more and more diverse types of housing in our community. I'm not sure if all of them have arrived, but did want to take the opportunity to introduce Luna Morris, Rob Berry, Jack Sandor, Max Thompson, Jim Mayer, Irene Allen, Mark Edwardson, Jaron Butterworth, Samuel Holland, Izzy Adachi, Cord Corse, Bridget Ryan, and Torben Werner. I also see in the gallery another key person for me. Erin Willis is my constituency assistant. She joined my office just about 4 months ago, and I'm incredibly grateful to have her. Will the House please join me in making all of these guests feel very welcome?
Madam Clerk.
Introduction of bills.
Leader of the Fourth Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I move a bill entitled the No Net Loss of Wetland Act 2023, which notice will be given in my name on the order paper, be introduced and read a first time now. I'm pleased to stand in the House to reintroduce the No Net Loss of Wetland Act, which I first brought forward in May of 2018. Wetlands are an important part of how nature functions. Fish, and wildlife habitat, organic carbon storage, water supply and purification, soil and water conservation, as well as tourism, heritage, recreation, education, and science are all things and more in terms of the values of wetlands. Occasionally, development can impact on the functions of wetlands, and this bill is designed that when a wetland is impacted, government will work with its partners to ensure that there is no net loss of wetland functions through investment or enhancements in other wetlands. This is an initiative that was first undertaken by Ducks Unlimited, and I'm introducing this bill now in recognition of the great work that Ducks Unlimited has done for more than 50 years.
Members, first reading of the bill. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the bill be placed on the orders of the day for second reading at the next sitting of the House after today.
You have heard the question. All those in favor indicate aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Madam Clerk.
Statements by members.
Member for West Vancouver Capilano.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we commence the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence on November 25th, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women is crucial to confront the stark reality of the situation today. Data from Statistics Canada highlights the surge in calls to the Battered Women's Support Services Crisis Line in Vancouver during the first month of the COVID-19 pandemic, revealing the heightened vulnerability of women in times of crisis. Additionally, in British Columbia last year, the rate of intimate partner violence was 292 persons per 100,000 population. This year's theme, Unite, Invest to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls, underscores the urgent need for substantial investment in prevention strategies to proactively address the rise of gender-based violence. Our unity during these 16 days and beyond is not just symbolic, or should not be just symbolic. It's a practical necessity as we confront the pervasive issue of violence against women globally. Mr. Speaker, in all communities, I have heard from women that are saying there are simply not enough housing options for them, for women's transition homes, safe places for them to leave, and particularly to leave with their children. That means that victims of gender-based violence often stay with their perpetrators because they don't have anywhere safe to go. If someone goes into a shelter or becomes homeless, MCFD also gets involved, and they run the risk of actually losing their children if they try and leave a violent situation. So education is our ally, Mr. Speaker. We must teach our children about consent, respect, and the importance of healthy relationships so we can break the cycle of violence. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Surrey Panorama.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week is National Addictions Awareness Week. Today and every day we remember those who have lost their lives due to drug overdose. We cannot forget that these are our brothers, fathers, uncles, sisters, sons, mothers, aunts, daughters, friends, and co-workers. We are also reminded that people are impacted by many forms of addictions in British Columbia. We see firsthand the deep pain, physical, mental, and emotional, that lies behind addiction. Shame and stigma often stand in the way of people getting the help they require. We must continue to build a system of care to help them where and when they need it. Addiction doesn't discriminate. It impacts every member of this House, every family in British Columbia, every community. And we are committed to fighting the stigma of addiction together. This year's theme is inspiration, innovation, and inclusion. Inspiration comes from the courage of those facing addiction, the resilience of communities, and the dedication of healthcare professionals. Innovation pushes us to find better ways to prevent and treat addiction. Inclusion means creating a safe space where people can seek help without judgment, breaking down barriers to treatment, and valuing every person's journey. I want to do a shout out to all the frontline care providers supporting those with addictions, especially those in Fraser Health in Surrey, in my riding, Surrey Panorama. There are programs to create awareness, to educate around addiction, and to deliver culturally appropriate supports. for members of our diverse communities, including our South Asian community. There is concerned outreach in community groups with international students as well as post-secondary institutions to look at ways to share information and resources to support students. I know that colleagues on both sides of the House have taken the time to listen to British Columbians who are making positive impacts across the province and supporting individuals dealing with addictions. Together, we can do this. Thank you.
Member for Kootenay East.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. 4 years ago, I was given a unique opportunity to work across party lines with colleagues from the Green Party and the NDP to bring recognition and to some degree solace to one of the darkest periods in our world history. The Holodomor, or death by hunger in Ukrainian, refers to the starvation of millions of Ukrainians in 1932 and 1933. The Holodomor can be seen as a culmination of an assault by the Communist Party and Soviet state of the Ukrainian peasantry who resisted Soviet policies. This heinous act to curtail the cultural autonomy of Ukrainians through intimidation, arrest, imprisonment, starvation, and execution was masterminded by Joseph Stalin and his totalitarian communist regime to eliminate the threat to Soviet ideological and state-building aspirations. Painfully, today we see the reoccurring nightmare of another unprovoked assault from a different Soviet dictatorship. This is a violent and targeted attack against the Ukrainian people. But as horror often repeats itself, I'm here to say so does kindness and support from this legislature. For example, earlier this year, this House worked together to bring support to Ukrainian refugees who fled their home country, not only with financial support, but also by providing a BC's driver's license test to be available in the Ukrainian language. And thank you for that. This may not seem like much to some, but to those who needed that support, it meant a lot. I want to thank this entire legislature once again for not only designating the fourth Saturday of November as Ukrainian Famine and Genocide, Holodomor Memorial Day, but let us all take some time this Saturday to join Ukrainian people and communities around the world in remembering the victims of Holodomor and honoring the strength of survivors. Thank you.
Member for Chilliwack Kent.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I'd like to start with a trigger warning, as today I'll be speaking about gender-based violence, and I want to honour that this is a painful and traumatic topic for so many and provide space for listeners to make the choice that supports their own well-being. November 25th is International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and marks the beginning of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, which is a time for people, organizations, communities, and governments to share how they're taking action to break the cycle of violence and provide safety and support for survivors. Everyone should feel safe and secure in their own home and community, but gender-based violence too often impacts women, girls, two-spirit, transgender, non-binary, and other gender-diverse people, with devastating and long-lasting effects. Gender-based violence can happen to anyone. You are not alone. Every day, community organizations, advocacy groups, sexual assault centers, victim services, and transition houses work tirelessly to support survivors and their communities with expertise and compassion. Thank you. I know you make all the difference in a seemingly impossible time. You are not alone. Many communities will be having events and vigils during the 16 days of activism, and I know groups and teams across BC are taking action to recognize and acknowledge the 16 days and the National Day of Remembrance. I encourage everyone to join in if they can and to help raise awareness. The message is end gender-based violence, and a reminder, you are not alone. For those who have experienced gender-based violence, for families and loved ones supporting victims and survivors, and also for those who may be living in danger right now. We grieve with you. There are resources available. You are not alone. If you are in immediate danger or think someone else is, you can call 911. You can also call or text Victim Link BC through its toll-free 24/7 confidential multilingual telephone service at 1-800-563-0808. Victim Link staff are there to provide immediate crisis support, information, and referral services. You are not alone.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Climate change will continue to deliver extremes: extreme heat, extreme drought, heavy rains, floods, and wildfires. Our best ally in combating these extremes is nature. We've degraded much of the nature in BC to the point where it can't help us when we need it the most. An example of this is the Cowichan Estuary. The partnership between the Nature Trust of BC, Cowichan Tribes, Ducks Unlimited Canada, the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation, and the provincial and federal governments is focused on the restoration of the Cowichan Estuary so that it can more effectively cope with rising sea levels and improve conditions for the sea life that depends on the health of that estuary. This project is one example of the restoration that needs to happen across BC. Over the next 2 years, dikes that have been created to hold back the estuary water will be removed. This will allow for intertidal channels, salt marsh habitat, and marine riparian habitats to be restored. The lands were purchased in 1990 by Nature Trust with the intention of restoring this ecologically significant area. There will be some loss of farmland for this restoration work, and of course, we have to be serious about protecting farmland. But the food security from the estuary is also critical. Young salmon start their lives in the estuary and return to spawn. Cowichan elders have shared stories from generations before, a time when crabs and clams were abundant and bountiful in the estuary ecosystem. BC's estuaries make up less than 3% of BC's coastline, yet they support 80% of coastal fish and wildlife. We have to be as serious as protecting these areas as we are about protecting farmland. I celebrate the critical work of the Cowichan Estuary Restoration Project, which will enhance resilience for Cowichan and for BC for the future.
Member for Port Moody Coquitlam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we've spent a bit of time in this House talking about housing, in fact, sometimes late into the evening. But I wanted to spend a few minutes talking about community, because it's the things in our community, the people and the places where we come together, that truly make a home feel like a home. Community is running into friends when you're walking your dog in Bert Flynn Park in Port Moody, a park that was not always a park. People came together to try to protect that park. In fact, voted out an entire city council to do that. Community is running along the Shoreline Trail and coming across a group of people looking up and talking about the herons' nests that are up there. Community is a Sunday concert in Rocky Point Park. You can also find this sense of community in our very own Brewers Row, a group of breweries located close to our Moody Centre SkyTrain station, right across from Rocky Point Park. It's often bustling with people, families, dogs, and it's an economic hub and a social hub of our city. You'll find trivia nights, open mic nights, weekly running groups, drag shows, yoga nights, and some incredibly amazing food trucks. I feel so fortunate to be able to represent such a dynamic and growing community. We know how important it is to build housing, but a home is truly a home when it's embedded in a community where we feel connected with each other in the spaces outside of our homes. These places are important too, Mr. Speaker, and need to be appreciated and strengthened and enhanced as we grow. Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Oral questions by members.
Member for Abbotsford West.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. For weeks now, the official opposition has been seeking real, actual relief for British Columbians who are facing dramatically increasing costs of living, including, unfortunately, the NDP government's relentless continued increases to the carbon tax. Those requests have been dismissed. They have been ignored. Yesterday, the official opposition received a copy of an internal memo sent by the Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation. I know the Minister will remember the memo. She sent it yesterday at 7:13 a.m. It's from the Minister, and I've sent a copy over to her just a few moments ago so she'd have it to reference. It begins with the following line, quote, "The Premier is looking for a big and shiny affordability measure." It goes on to reveal plans to politically manipulate BC Hydro, to stall collapsing support for Clean BC. Can the Minister of Energy and Mines explain what exactly she meant by big and shiny affordability measure?
Well,
Premier.
Honourable Speaker, I wonder why the member of the opposition would be surprised that this side of the House is looking for every opportunity to support British Columbians. I make no apology for searching for affordability options for British Columbia, especially as we prepare our budget.
Members.
Big affordability initiatives? Absolutely, Honourable Speaker. And let me tell you about the affordability initiatives that many British Columbians actually think are helpful and shiny, Honourable Speaker. Reducing childcare costs by up to $900 a month. That's a big affordability aspect. When the other side kept increasing ICBC rates over and over, and that minister lacked the political courage to even release a report with the recommendations of how to fix ICBC when he sat on this side of the House, the member for Abbotsford West, when he cut those pages out of the report about how to make ICBC more affordable for British Columbians, and now he stands up and says, shame on you for trying to find more affordability options for British Columbians. Shame on you, member.
Member for Abbotsford West, supplemental.
Thanks, Honourable Chair. Well, it'll be interesting to see if the Premier maintains his enthusiasm to defend the document. The Minister's memo goes beyond just manipulating families with talks of something big and shiny, which, by the way, families need something real and practical, not big and shiny. In her memo, the Minister proposes an order in Council to gain, quote, it's the quote from the memo, leverage with companies like Fortescue. You're either going to pay BC Hydro $1 billion under the existing tariff or agree to scale down the size of your project. End quote. Fortescue is the proponent of Project Coyote, a multi-billion-dollar green hydrogen and ammonia production facility located in Prince George. Can the Minister explain what appears to be a clear threat, and what does she mean when she says she wants to acquire leverage over Fortescue?
Premier.
Well, Honourable Chair.
Members.
Now we're...
Members. Premier has the floor.
These are the exact projects that the members on the other side were railing against yesterday in our Clean BC plan. How dare you? $1 billion plant for the member for Prince George's community that is struggling economically. They all stood up and said abandon climate change.
Member for Prince George Valemount. Members, please. No interruptions. Thank you.
Honourable Speaker, today they're supporting it supposedly. Yesterday, it was all about attacking our Clean BC plan that's delivered record numbers of investment in this province from companies like Fortescue. I've met with the CEO. He flew to Prince George. He met with the mayor. He met with the First Nations. I love the project. There is a huge challenge. They need 1,000 megawatts of power to do what they want to do, and it has to be clean energy. We have to do this work with Fortescue. We have to do this work with hydrogen. The other side got up yesterday and they said, we're going to rewarm Christy Clark's 2013 LNG plan. Well, we're moving in a different direction, Honourable Speaker. They oppose it. We stand for climate action. We support the project, and we're going to do the work.
Members, let's have the courtesy to hear each other, please. Member for Absor West, second supplemental.
And, Mr. Speaker, what has become abundantly clear is the new direction involves threatening companies. Threatening them. Companies who are threatening companies that have entered a regulatory process in good faith, who are part of an exercise, who want to invest, but are now, according to the Minister of Energy and Mines' own document, being confronted by this. Quote, you'll either going to pay BC Hydro $1 billion or agree to scale down the size of your project. Isn't that eerily familiar to what the BC Business Council economist, Mr. Peacock, said when he wrote that the government's approach to climate change is to downsize the economy, is to shrink the economy, make your project smaller. We want to see people come to British Columbia and invest. And the Minister of Energy is developing strategies to threaten them. So the question, to threaten them to downsize their project. She sent the memo. The Premier can try to cover as much as he wants. What did she mean when she said to Fortescue, when she alluded to Fortescue and said, I'm going to either get them to pay $1 billion or I'm going to tell them to downsize their project?
Why are you at it?
Member, you want to answer? If not, please stay quiet. Premier.
The inconsistency from the other side of the House on climate action is unbelievable. This is the same group that literally yesterday said they would rip up the climate plan that delivered Canada's first renewable diesel refinery, Canada's first, in Prince George. They said they would rip up that plan. That was yesterday. If you want to talk about threatening business, if you want to talk about threatening jobs, abandoning the Clean BC plan that has delivered lower emissions, record foreign direct investment, including the
ask another
E-Moly
question
project,
after that.
including the E-Moly project in Maple Ridge, with a company that wouldn't have come here under their watch because they were only promoting LNG. Fortescue, I met with the CEO, he met with the mayor, he met with First Nations. We love the project. Here's the challenge. They need 1,000 megawatts of clean power. How do we ensure that we deliver that without impacting rate affordability for British Columbians? We need affordability, we need clean energy, we need jobs. And Honourable Speaker, there's only one party that's going to deliver all those things. It's this side of the House. That side of the House doesn't like this project. They don't like the clean diesel refinery. They don't like clean BC. They rip it all up, and that's not a surprise to anybody.
Members, if the opposition wants to ask questions and answer themselves, that's okay. We can arrange that. If not, let the other side answer. But you will disagree with the answer, no doubt about it. But let's have the courtesy to listen to that, please. Member for Kootenay East.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Well, this isn't the time for deflection. This is time for some answers and some straight-up ones from the minister. She's got some explaining to do. Let's look at the tactics that are being used right now by this government to adjudicate projects. Let's be clear, the NDP is clearly picking winners and losers here because according to the minister herself in her own document, it says right now we have no framework to adjudicate between projects fairly, end quote. The minister's memo underlines how NDP manipulation has left BC Hydro woefully short of the power we need. We've been saying that for a long time now, and there is not enough electricity for industrial development. This NDP government were the ones that delayed and opposed Site C and shut down clean energy projects, mainly IPPs, and now they don't have enough power, and now they're in panic mode. The minister writes she wants to use a stick against companies and is intent on applying leverage against Fortescue's Project Coyote project to force them to scale down the size of their project. That's clean and simple. The minister needs to respond. Can the minister explain, in her own words, about using leverage and a stick against companies?
Premier.
Honourable Speaker, I have been very clear that there is a huge opportunity for British Columbia right now. We have clean, firm power that is in desire from a whole range of industries. Now, the province of Quebec has been building in advance of demand. I think there's an opportunity for us to do that too. And so we have a task force working with BC Hydro to deliver more power at actually affordable rates for British Columbia, because that's something that matters to us, and it didn't matter to you when you did the IPP project. So in addition to that, we have a number of proposals coming forward to us that are looking at the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States and saying, look, we're thinking about locating in the United States. What kind of support can you offer in British Columbia? And we're working with the federal government, with these companies. But we need a framework to be able to determine which projects go ahead in terms of public support in that way. This is not an inconsequential thing. It resulted in a $1 billion investment in Maple Ridge in the E1 Moly project. So when we get it right, there are good family supporting jobs. But it's important to get it right. It is a fraught process. This is public money and it is serious. So the need for a framework is an important thing. And I'm surprised the members oppose that, but of course they oppose our entire clean economy agenda, where we're reducing emissions and delivering jobs right across the province.
Kootenai supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Well, we have all this power. If we're so flush with power, why are we using sticks and leverages against companies? These are partners in British Columbia, Honourable Speaker, using a leverage and a stick against these companies who have entered a regulatory process, such as Project Coyote, in an environmental assessment process right now, in good faith, I might add, is just the kind of unpredictable and hostile environment that will drive more jobs out of BC. Here is yet another candid admission from the Minister about the NDP's Cost BC framework that is in total shambles. The framework makes, quote, most projects uneconomic to proceed, end quote. Can the Minister explain, and here's the opportunity for the Minister to explain her own memo, can the Minister explain her own words about making most projects uneconomic?
Premier.
Thank you, Honourable Chair. November 2023, E1 Moly announces a $1 billion battery plant in Maple Ridge, 450 jobs. January 2023, U.S. company Alchemy X invested $201 million in expanding visual effects operations in Vancouver. September 2023, Canfor announced $200 million for new high-efficiency facility in Houston, BC. June 2023, Massive Canada announced a $75 million new mass timber manufacturing facility in Williams Lake. March 2023, DP World completed their $350 million Vancouver port expansion. September 2022, Sand Group announced a $23 million in the value-added division at Port Alberni. April 2022, Weta FX announced $201 million for their international visual effects office outside New Zealand. August 2021, Hexagon Purist broke ground on a $237 million battery pack and hydrogen storage facility. I could go on, Honourable Chair.
House Leader of the Third Party.
Rest assured, Mr. Speaker, the Premier will have his opportunity to continue, but on a different topic. Perhaps with all the exercise the Premier's been getting today, he will finally answer a question on behalf of the most vulnerable children in our province. For years, we've heard tragic stories. We've read the Ministry of Children and Family Development audits and the damning reports from the representative of children and youth. All have painted a picture of a broken child welfare system in British Columbia. This session, I have clearly outlined the hypocrisy of this BC NDP government, who can't even hold themselves to the same basic standards that their former leader, John Horgan, had when he demanded the minister protect children and not protect the institution, Mr. Speaker. After hearing yet another tragic story in the Fraser Valley, reading another pathetic ministry audit, I've had enough. And for the first time, and only time, I called for the resignation or the firing of a cabinet minister. There's another story, Mr. Speaker, this time of a judge, Kimberly Arthur Leung, who excoriated this ministry for failing to deliver the basic standards of social work while holding parents accountable. The judge called for, quote, ethical, moral, and legal consequences for the level of neglect. Mr. Speaker, to the Premier, what more is there to say? How many more stories do we need to hear and read before this Premier will finally stand up, as he's been doing all morning, and seriously take action for a serious problem?
Minister of Children and Family Development.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for the question. And I absolutely understand his passion. I understand where the question is coming from. And when I hear of examples where basic practice and policy are not being followed, I also have the same response, and I also ask those questions, and I give direction to staff to make sure that actually policies and procedures are being followed, and that I know that there is good quality oversight of all of the practice of all of our frontline workers. Having been a frontline worker myself, Honourable Speaker, I know how important it is to follow basic practices and procedures to make sure that children are seen, that they are supported, and that they receive all of the services that they need.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let the answer stand to provide the example of why we need a new Minister of Children and Family Development. When we are reduced to talking about the most basic level of service not being delivered over and over and over again, not one audit, not one report, but multiple, over and over and over again, and then that's the response? It's astonishing, Mr. Speaker. We have been raising good policy ideas that aren't necessarily ours. They're shared by the social work community that can improve the Ministry of Children and Family Development. We suggested that instead of apprehending children and dooming them to this broken child welfare system this minister is managing, why not put the $135,000 into a fund, make it accessible by the family, get them food and clothing, for daycare and other social services that they need. Instead of having the social workers, why not have them support the family, not destroy them? We made basic suggestion that social workers in this ministry be required to be members of the College of Social Work, Mr. Speaker. It protects them and the children from the broken bureaucratic child welfare system. The BC NDP, they're studying it. The report unavailable. It's clear the Minister of Children and Family Development is totally incapable of the transformational change that her ministry needs. So through you to the Premier, one more chance to stand up and answer this question, Mr. Premier. One more chance. When is he going to replace this Minister of Children and Family Development with a serious person? Someone who's going to take the job seriously. Just like they did in the 1990s, maybe with someone from outside of government, and create a child welfare system in this province that we can be proud of, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. Since 2017, we have been making really significant changes in the ministry. This chamber unanimously supported significant legislative change to support Indigenous child welfare jurisdiction. We have also introduced historical legislation leading the country to support young people who are leaving the care system and transitioning to adulthood. We have harmonised the rates for in-care and out-of-care, and we're changing the whole of the in-care system. We're working on the system and services to support children and youth with support needs. Honourable Speaker, we have the lowest number of children and youth in care in over 30 years. We have the lowest number of Indigenous children in care in over 20 years. Honourable Speaker, I know there is a lot more work to do, and I am absolutely determined to continue to make improvements and to change the child welfare system.
Leader of the Fourth Party.
Robust.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the City of Surrey is going to the people of Surrey with an ad campaign showing that this NDP's Surrey police tax will cost Surrey residents $10,000 per homeowner over a 10-year period, with zero increase in public safety. Conservatives have been clear. We support democracy. We support a referendum on policing in Surrey so that Surrey taxpayers can make an informed, democratic decision. But unfortunately, instead, the Premier has come down on Surrey with an iron fist. And since then, the NDP has been trying to bully, belittle, and diminish Mayor Brenda Locke and the Surrey taxpayers. So the question to the Minister of Public Safety, now that the City of Surrey has taken out advertisements to demonstrate how much this brutal NDP tax hike is costing everyday working homeowners, will you admit that this bullying approach has failed, restore democracy, and hold a referendum?
Opposition House Leader.
Thank you so much.
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate it. Thanks to the member for the question. We have canvassed this issue extensively. This has been a topic in our region for 5 years now, where the decision first by an elected council was made to head towards a regional police service. I do believe the mayor was part of the mayor was part of that original slate that ran on having Surrey police. Now we've gone through our extensive review. The Solicitor General has done independent reviews on costing, and it was determined that in order to ensure safety of the public, that the police transition needs to continue. That was what was determined. Now I think it's important that the City of Surrey, of course, can do what they believe they need to do, but when we have so many challenges in our communities, we're struggling with housing, we're struggling with so many things. Surely,
members,
if the member over there has a question, I suspect the member should stand up and ask the question. This was asked by the BC Conservative Party. So, if the mayor wants to address important issues in our community like housing and other issues, what I would recommend is instead of spending dollars on this, spend that money on infrastructure so we can get more housing built in our communities.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm sure the residents of Surrey would much rather be spending those $10,000 on those infrastructure as opposed to the NDP's tax plan. However, Mr. Speaker, Surrey isn't the only one suffering across this province. Families all across BC are being crushed by this unbelievable weight of the Socialist NDP's anti-homeowner agenda.
They wish to be socialist.
This NDP Premier says, and I quote, "Government cannot rely on the private sector. Government needs to build middle-class housing," end quote. He says that the NDP-built homes, the government-owned homes, will be, and I quote, "privatization-proof," end quote. In other words, this anti-private sector NDP plan will actually make it impossible for middle-class workers to actually own their own home and build equity for that matter. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to point out that this approach has been tried in other jurisdictions. Cuba, Venezuela, Argentina, North Korea, and even the old Soviet Union took this approach. The reality is...
Member has the floor. Please continue. Member will continue.
The reality is socialism kills the middle class. That's been proven time and time again. Why is this NDP Premier suggesting that the private sector has no role in building housing? And does he really believe that socialism this time could actually work?
You listed communism.
Government House Leader.
I don't know where to start, Honourable Speaker. It's not often that I'm lost for words in this place. I spent the last few days defending our legislation to allow more private sector homes to be built. I spent 2 days defending our position on enabling the private sector to be able to build more housing. And today I'm being told that we're destroying the private sector and not. I don't know. Honourable Speaker, I don't believe this is a serious question. But I will say...
Members.
Honourable Speaker, here's what we have said consistently, and I'll say it again. The private sector has a role to play in addressing the housing crisis. That's why we're legalizing housing with our legislation. That's why we're legalizing housing on single-family lots. That's why we're legalizing opportunities for homes near transit. But we cannot address the housing crisis just by the private sector. There are certain segments of our population that the not-for-profit sector has to play a role in. We said that from the beginning. We need everyone to be part of the solution. Yes, the private sector has a very important role. We need to support that. But the non-market housing sector must grow. That's why, Honourable Speaker, we're investing $7 billion in funding to build affordable housing. That's why we have a $500 million rental protection fund.
Thank you.
That's why we have a $500 million rental protection fund to get more housing back into the non-market sector. It's vitally important we do that, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you so much. Member for Parksville, Qualicum.
Thank you, Speaker. Yesterday in question period, I heard the Premier, as we all did, make statements defending the Clean BC plan and pointing out that 2022 was a record year for exports in British Columbia. The party was jubilant about the idea that we saw a record level of exports and pointed to that success as the Clean BC plan. Members in this House know that our largest export is energy products. And in 2022, we saw a massive increase, a doubling of the value of coal exports in British Columbia. There is a lack of common sense when the Premier, in defending the Clean BC plan, points to a doubling of coal exports as a measure of success. My question to the Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation is we will see in the next couple of years some significant energy projects come online. The Trans Mountain Pipeline in 1 year, LNG Canada 2 years from now, the Coastal GasLink pipeline is already completed. The question to the Minister of Energy, Mines and Low Carbon Innovation is what is the total emissions that we will see in British Columbia, not the downstream emissions, what are the emissions that we will see in British Columbia from these projects for the pipeline, for the compressor stations, and for the fuel that we use to transfer this energy across the world?
Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. As the member knows, our Clean BC plan is modelled on a 40% reduction in emissions from the 2007 baseline by 2030. We're working hard to meet that. That includes accounting for resource extraction and production in British Columbia. It includes, as the member should know, the emissions upstream and at the facility from LNG Canada Phase 1 that was modelled within the plan. In addition to that, we're bringing in an emissions cap on the oil and gas sector to meet their sectoral target of 33 to 38%. And the member should know that coal exports from British Columbia are metallurgical coal, among the least carbon-intensive coal in the world, and it is used to make steel for things like wind turbines and many other facets of the clean economy.
Member supplemental.
Thank you, Speaker. I listened carefully and I didn't get an answer at all. Yes, we're exporting coal and the party seems to be proud of this. That coal gets burned. Whether it's used to create energy or used to create steel, it still represents significant emissions. I'm not talking about the downstream emissions. We have seen in the 16 years of the BC Liberals, now BC United, the total emissions in British Columbia went down by 2.4 megatons. Under their watch, emissions went down. We have seen this government reduce emissions by 2.4 megatons, exactly the same. The question is not about all the great work that's taking place. I asked very specifically, and I know the minister has the answer, what are the total emissions that these three massive industrial projects will have for British Columbia?
Minister of Environment.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and let me correct the member. Emissions went up in British Columbia from 2007 to 2017, and when we introduced the Clean BC plan in 2018, they have gone down. In absolute terms, they've gone down on per capita terms while our economy has grown, while our population has grown massively. It is significant. below when we took office and below 2007, and our efforts to reduce emissions further continue to ramp up. If the member wants exact numbers, I suggest the member access the Clean BC website, where we provide transparent information for all British Columbians. Thank you.
The bell ends the question period. Leader of the third party. Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise to seek leave to table a letter from the Nature Trust of British Columbia.
Is leave granted? Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to enter into the record this letter from the Nature Trust of BC responding to comments made by the member for Nechako Lakes on October 5th of this year regarding land acquired by the Nature Trust in the Cowichan Valley, claiming the organization acted unlawfully in breach of contract. The letter seeks to correct the record and the claims that were made by the member are incorrect and unfounded, and was sent to ministers on October 31st, 2023.
Thank you. Minister of Citizen Services.
Thank you, Speaker. I have the honor to present the annual report of the Chief Records Officer.
Thank you. Madam Clerk. Sorry, Courtney East.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I rise to present a petition from 2,739 concerned citizens of the East Kootenay and the province of British Columbia that we have lost our right to accessible health care. Honourable Speaker, I want to thank and recognize these petitions that were a culmination between the Triangle Women's Institute of Grassmere and the Sparwood Thrift Shop, and respectfully request that the Honourable House upgrade the East Kootenay Regional Hospital to fill the medical needs of East Kootenay residents requiring renal, cardiology, and oncology, including radiation care and treatment. Until that time, the petitioners strongly recommend access to Lethbridge and Calgary hospitals be granted and available to patients of the East Kootenay.
Thank you. Madam Clerk.
Orders of the day.
Government House Leader.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. In this chamber, I'll call Committee of the Whole Bill 45, Legislative Statutes Amendment Act. Douglas, for Committee Room, I call Committee of the Whole on Bill 44, Housing Statutes Amendment Act.
Committee Chairs.
Thank you, members. There's been a request for a brief recess so that the opposition critic can arrive. We will be going to Bill 45, just for everybody's understanding in this chamber. Okay, no, we will now come out of recess. The critic has arrived. All right, I think we're going to get underway if everyone's ready. Yes, I understand we're doing Bill 45, Miscellaneous Statutes Amendment Act number 4, 2023. I've been given an indication that there's going to be some changes to the ordering of the clauses that we're going to address, but I look to the government for... we are on Clause 1 unless there's been a move to stand it down, which hasn't happened yet. So. Deputy House, Acting Government House Leader.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to be standing down Part 1 of the bill, moving to Part 2, the Post-Secondary Education and Future Skills Amendments.
I think there's two clauses related to housing. My understanding is you wanted to go to Clause 3. Is that correct?
Yes, Clause 3, please.
So the Clause 1, for clarity for everyone, Clause 1 and Clause 2 are currently being stood down. We will return to those at a later time. So we will start at Clause 3. Which is titled Professional Governance Act. On Clause 3, I recognize the member for Cariboo North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Could the Minister walk us through the history of this Act? Of course, it was introduced first in 2019 and then amended in 2022, and here we are again, as with so many bills that we've seen during this legislative session. We are amending a bill for the third time. What prompted these further changes?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. Before I begin, I'd just like to introduce two folks who are here to help me in terms of answering the questions, which is Kate Haynes, the Superintendent of Professional Governance, and Elena Van Leeuwen, the Deputy Superintendent of Professional Governance, who have a wealth of experience in the administration of this Act. And so the member's well familiar with the Act, as she alluded to, in terms of its introduction and then changes. This set of measures represents a series of technical housekeeping amendments that stem from advice from the Office of the Superintendent of Professional Governance, from the practical experience applying and administering the Act, namely the purpose on a general sense, because the member asked a general question, is in order to bring clarity to the regulatory community on the powers under these provisions in the administration, with an eye to the process for adding additional professions or additional professional regulators under the Act.
Member.
Mr. Speaker, through you, was there a specific process or series of events that necessitated these changes to a still relatively new Act?
Minister of State for Labour Development.
Thank you, Chair. So the Office of the Superintendent of Professional Governance, and I'll go back and forth between saying that and OSPG in the purpose of this debate, but the OSPG conducted 2 designation assessments in 2022, as well went through the process to designate architecture under the Act, and had a considerable amount of experience where the rubber hits the road with that led to the provisions you see before you today.
Member.
Mr. Speaker, through you to the Minister, mentioned that 2 designations have gone through in 2022. What were those 2?
Minister.
For clarity for the member, they were designation assessments, not designations, and that is home inspectors and landscape architects.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Through you to the Minister, I guess then the most recent profession brought under this Act was the architects. Why did this process take 3 years?
Minister.
Could the member elaborate which process she's referring to? Is she referring to the assessment process for the professions or the process for amendments?
Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What was the most recent profession brought in under this Act, and how did the process inform these changes? I heard the Minister mention architects, so maybe that could be a good example of something that we could canvass.
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So to answer the member's question, architects is the most recent profession. The OSPG worked collaboratively with the regulator for between 1 to 2 years on bringing architects underneath the PGA. And there was a number of, mechanics that had to be worked through in terms of the profession's bylaws, the implications for the board. And that process and the experience of the OSPG working through it, which is, as the member knows, the world of professional governance can be very niche and idiosyncratic and very technical, but that process then of going through and applying that has led to, has in part led to these amendments to bring clarity around the process for the potential for future designation, just to make that simpler and more clear for all parties going forward.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, through you to the Minister. What were the costs associated with this most recent process? I understand we're trying to streamline and we're trying to provide clarity, and I know we'll get better as we have more go through, but approximately what would be the estimation of the costs?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So with the caveat that that is a question that is more appropriate for estimates than the committee process in debate on these amendments, I will say for the member's knowledge that there were no external consultants engaged in that process, and that's just part of the regular cost and FTE component of the OSPG and their regular duties.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister. Just because I'm fascinated by this whole process, and of course the team that works behind this, probably know a few of them. So I'm just curious, and as I was following through on Bill 38 as well, and understanding that team that's behind it through the Ministry of Post-Secondary Future Skills, READY, and now the OSPG, is there a correlation, or I guess the team that's working on this, will this team have any, are any of the members on that team also going to be part of the 8 people in the superintendent that was mentioned that was brought through Bill 38? And for the, I guess, for members who might be watching the International Credentials Recognition Act?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. This is straying a bit from the matter under consideration, but this was pretty well canvassed with the member's colleague during the debate in committee on Bill 38, which is that the OSPG and the FTE tag to the OSPG in the ministry will be merging with the Credential Recognition Improvement Branch in order to administer both acts.
Member.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair, to the Minister. I think it is relevant because it speaks to the team that will be responsible and bringing this through. I think when it was canvassed, there was 8 people that was looking at a significant amount of work. I guess I speak to the process and the timelines because we want to make sure that all the legislation that we're bringing forward is we'll be able to enact, and it'll be timely, and 8 people to manage multiple pieces of legislation, multiple acts is pretty significant. So is there a thought to like the work plan on how we're doing all of the credentialing, as well as now bringing in this piece of this act if there are other professions that are going to be brought in? So I'm just trying to understand from a scope perspective, a significant amount of work that these pieces of legislation are now going to be being brought forward. And as I understand it, we have a superintendent and I think 8 people or 8 staff that are working on that. And I could...
I would just ask that questions about other legislation be asked during those periods, and we just stay focused on this piece.
Sure. Well, then on this piece of legislation, how many staff will be working to enact this piece of legislation, including, I guess, you've got the superintendent and then the staff working on this piece of legislation?
Minister.
So for clarity, Chair, this is not a new function or setting up a new office that needs to be stood up under these amendments. These are bringing clarity and some changes to an existing process in order to designate professions and professional regulators under the Professional Governance Act. The question the member is asking was debated at length in the committee stage debate in Bill 38 with her colleague, the member from Shuswap. I think we spent 1 to 2 hours talking about the civil service organization of the OSPG and the new superintendent for international credential recognition. I think we're straying pretty broadly from the relevance, as this doesn't set up a new superintendent. I will indulge the member here, as it's been debated at length already in this House, that there are 8 FTE in the OSPG. There are 8 FTE in the Credential Recognition Improvement Branch, which are being reorganized together as one body. A posting will go up under the BC Civil Service Act for one individual to fulfill the role of both superintendents, and they will be, the acts will be co-managed by that group, and we expect it to be about 15 to 20 FTE. I mean, there will be and has to be some flexibility there in terms of the actual workflow and demand as it proceeds and as the other act comes into implementation. But I would say we're straying pretty far from the relevance of this act. This act is about amendments to the process to designate new professions and professional regulators, to delve deeply into the FTE. I mean, I understand the members' curiosity. It's a very interesting team doing a very interesting and cool field of work. I think it's most properly left to the estimates process, which the member is going to have a considerable amount of time with after budget.
Member on Clause 3.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just to be clear, too, this is my legislative time to make sure that what is being brought forward it has done the due diligence and the checks and balances, so it is very relevant because it goes to the fact that it took 1 to 2 years to go through the process of just bringing in one body, the architects, as we discussed in the previous. So what, from a scope perspective, what is this team of 15 to 20 people as we bring in the amendment, because we're looking at the process for bringing in new professions into this act. I'm trying to understand the scope, so it takes 1 to 2 years to get one through this process. There's quite a list. How many have been completed under this act so far from what was originally set forward in 2019?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. And for clarity, there were initially 5 professions under the Act, or 5 professional regulators. Architects were added, which brings it to 6. And the OSPG has many functions with those regulators, from capacity monitoring to compliance reviews and a whole matter of things. So, I mean, 1 to 2 years for the architects doesn't denote that that's all they were doing in that span of time. There's a whole range of work and factors of things that they've got going on in that sense. But to be clear, this provision will not add, these amendments will not add additional scope in terms of scope of work. There are already provisions within the Professional Governance Act that deal with designating new professions or new professional regulators under the Act. What these provisions do in these amendments is amend those provisions of the Professional Governance Act to bring more clarity to the process, in large part for professional regulators and the regulatory community, so that that can go forward. And so in that sense, it doesn't add any additional scope than what was under the Act previously. And it really is, when I say they're technical housekeeping items that are born from the experience of the OSPG in terms of the administration of that in their experience, that's exactly what they are.
Member.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, through the Minister. So in Section 3, or Clause 3, Section 1, by adding the following definitions, what is the significance of adding the definition of designated profession to the Professional Governance Act? And can the Minister walk us through what this is for and how any regulations are impacted by this definition?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. And so this is a good example of providing clarity for the regulators who are looking at this Act. What this does, it doesn't so much add designated profession. That definition is already under the Act, but it's under Section 89 of the Act. So what this does is it moves that into the definitions section. So a regulator or someone on the board of or working for a professional regulator, if they go to the definitions section, can find the defined terms, which adds to the basically the readability of the Act for the regulators.
Member.
Through you, Mr. Chair, can the Minister explain the rationale behind the inclusion of the definition of the professional organization under this clause and broadly within the Act? And further, can there be more than one professional organization for a designated profession that meets this criteria?
Minister.
Thank you to the member for the question. So what including professional organization does is it defines a term that's used in the Act but is left undefined, which can lead to some confusion. And so it defines professional organization. There can be more than one professional organization for a given profession under this definition, which is a corporation that acts as an advocate for persons who practice a profession and is not a professional regulator. And I'll give, for the sake of clarity, an example that comes to my mind in my previous life as a regulated professional, as a lawyer. There's the Law Society of British Columbia, which is a regulator, but there are many professional organizations that promote the profession. For instance, the Canadian Bar Association, or one I had a lot of experience with, the Canadian Association of Labour Lawyers. You can have a number of different organizations that promote or do advocacy on behalf of the profession that aren't the regulator.
Member.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what changes are introduced by the repeal of the definition of professional regulator and the subsequent substitution in Section 1, subsection 1 of the Professional Governance Act?
Minister.
Thank you to the question from the member. So this really goes to removing ambiguity or the potential for any confusion, which also is part of the reason it's tied to the introduction of professional organization. It functionally removes the word association. And for exactly the example I just gave, the Canadian Association of Labour Lawyers is an association, it's not a regulator. And so it just makes it much more clear for folks who inhabit that regulatory space and who deal with these bodies on exactly what the provision means.
Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to the Minister, do you see that the amendment definition of the professional regulator will any way impact the governance structure of the professions under the Professional Governance Act?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So to the member's question, so this is really about making the distinction between a professional regulator and a professional organization. Once they come under the Act, they'd be expected to be regulated and achieve the same governance standards. Now, that being said, there are provisions here in this statutes bill that deal with some transitional governance issues for bodies that come under the PGA that I'm happy to canvass as we get down to them. But for the purpose here, this is more so just about making that distinction.
Member.
Very much, Mr. Chair, and I do look forward to canvassing that when we get to that portion of the bill. The new definition for professional regulator now actually specifies jurisdiction. Why was it necessary now and not before to specify jurisdiction, and what prompted this change?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So this is another example of just bringing clarity to regulators in terms of changing language from an enactment to an act of British Columbia, another province, or Canada, so that they know that it's not necessarily exclusive to an act of just say the province of British Columbia.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, how does the amendment to the definition of professional regulator align with the governance responsibilities outlined in the Acts of British Columbia, other provinces, or Canada?
Minister.
Thank you, sir. Just a question of clarification for the member. Is the member asking about potential for conflict between an enactment and the Professional Governance Act for a body that comes under?
Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you, just for clarification, there are other acts that may what supersedes. So if you have the acts of British Columbia or you have this piece of legislation, would there ever be what piece of legislation supersedes this act?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So the Professional Governance Act was drafted with an eye to that problem. So once a professional body comes under the PGA, or professional regulator comes under the PGA, their home enactment can be repealed by regulation. That conflict would not arise once they are under the PGA. The PGA then becomes the enactment, and the OSPG derives their authority from that.
Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you, that answered my next question was why the repeal and the substitute of the definition of the regulatory body. So thank you very much. Can the minister elaborate on the role of the regulatory bodies as outlined in the amended Section 1, subsection 1 of the Professional Governance Act?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So the function of a regulatory body under the Professional Governance Act continues to be to regulate the profession. The function of the amendment here specifically gets away from the language of a regulatory body that is continued, established, etc., and instead points to Schedule 1 of the Act, where the regulatory bodies under the Act are listed, for clarity's sake.
Shall Clause 3 pass? So ordered. On Clause 4, member for Caribou North.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through you to the minister. This change appears to be mainly housekeeping and shuffling pieces of the Act around. Can the minister confirm, are there any substantive changes made to these provisions in Section 1?
Minister.
No.
Member.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, through you to the minister, why would it be necessary to move these provisions around?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So this clause is similar type of housekeeping to consolidating the definitions in the definition section. This was in the designation section, but pertains to the powers of regulatory bodies. So it's been consolidated into, or will be consolidated into, the part of the Act that deals with regulatory bodies.
Shall Clause 4 pass? So ordered. Member for Caribou North on Clause 5.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Through the Minister, how does the amended definition clarify or modify the scope of a differing governing body compared to the previous definition, particularly in terms of professional regulation within and outside of Canada?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So this is another piece of housekeeping that has to do with the change to the definition of professional regulator, which now includes being an enactment and specifies jurisdiction as being another province or within Canada. And so this is a change that just reflects that change in the provision of the Professional Governance Act that deals with conflict or discipline from professional bodies outside of Canada.
Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, through you to the Minister. Considering the previous definition and this amended definition, are there any subtle nuances in language or terminology that might influence the interpretation of what constitutes an applicable regulatory body in each case?
Minister.
No.
Shall Clause 5 pass? Aye. So ordered. Shall Clause 6 pass? Aye. So ordered. Member for Caribou North on Clause 7.
Can the Minister outline how the role of the superintendent is changed under this clause?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So this provision doesn't change any of the obligations or responsibilities of the superintendent, but what it does do, what this amendment does do, is add some administrative and procedural fairness components to the process. Namely, it provides an opportunity to be heard before the superintendent provides a report to the minister, and it also requires the OSPG to publish the minister's written reasons for the recommendations the minister makes under this provision to the Lieutenant Governor and Council. So it provides for some more openness, transparency, and fairness.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through the minister. So that's one piece of how the minister's role is further refined under this amended section. But through you, what is the minister now required to do that you might not have been required to do in the previous act?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So what one of the main parts of this provision is it includes a provision so that the minister's recommendation to the Lieutenant Governor and Council respecting a designation of a profession, that there's a recommendation respecting whether a new regulatory body should be established, an existing professional regulator continued, or an existing regulatory body being given responsibility for the new profession, and that goes back to the experience of the OSPG dealing with regulators. There may be instances where you bring a profession under, or rather than going through and bringing a whole regulatory body under, you may want to designate a current regulatory body or a different regulatory body as the regulatory body for a given profession.
Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. By when must the superintendent publish the minister's written response as per subsection 5? Is there a timeline? Will formal notification be sent out through specific channels, and if so, how?
Minister.
Our expectation would be in a timely manner.
Member.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Could we be a little bit more clear for what timely would be? Is timely 3 months? Is timely 3 weeks? What would be the expectation?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So this would effectively be an order in council of the Lieutenant Governor in council, and so it would be subject to the cabinet process and the process of cabinet confidentiality. The OSPG would coordinate the posting of the reasons along with that.
Member.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the minister, if an application is deemed refused under subsection 6, is there an appeals process or is the refusal final?
Minister.
Thank you, Chair. So under the Act, it would be a final process, but of course, subject to administrative law and procedural fairness.
Shall Clause 7 pass? So ordered. Shall Clause 8 pass? So ordered. And I understand the member has questions on Clause 9, but we're going to note the hour. The minister has to report out.
Oh.
Apologies, member. You're keen to help. Noting the hour, Minister.
Noting the hour, Chair, I move that the committee rise, report progress, and ask leave to sit again.
Members have heard the question. All those in favour? Aye. Opposed? Carried. This committee is adjourned. Thank you, members.
Committee Chair.
Committee on Bill 45 reports progress and seeks leave to sit again.
When shall the committee sit again, Government House Leader?
Next sitting, Speaker.
So ordered. Committee Chair.
Mr. Speaker, Section A reports progress on Bill number 44 and asks leave to sit again.
Again, when shall the committee sit again, Government House Leader?
Next sitting, Speaker.
So ordered. Government House Leader.
I move that the House do now adjourn.
Member, you heard the question. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. This House stands adjourned until 1 p.m. today.
You're probably right.